Hello, I'm Hannah Shuckburgh and I'm going to read to you Archie's Apple, my new picture book, written by me and illustrated by Octavia Mackenzie. There was once a little boy called Archie. He lived with his daddy in an old stone cottage next to a big dark wood. At night, while he got ready for bed, Archie looked out of his bedroom window at the silhouettes of the trees against the star-strewn sky, listening for the sound of a barn owl. Every morning, while he brushed his teeth, Archie searched for buzzards soaring against the sunrise or wood pigeons calling from the treetops. On his windowsill, Archie kept a collection of leaves, pine cones, bits of lichen and a jay feather that he'd found in the wood, along with his football cards and a toy helicopter that his cousin Dorothy had given him. The moment he got back from school, Archie would hang his coat on the peg by the door, pull on his wellies and run off into the wood to play. In the spring, he waited for the first bluebells and wood anemones to push up through damp ground and loved sniffing the pungent green leaves of wild garlic. Once, he heard a nightingale sing. In the summer, he stayed out as late as his daddy would let him, watching the bees funnel into head-high foxgloves, listening to the chirps of a meadow grasshopper, or letting a frill-winged comma butterfly land on his outstretched hand. In the autumn, he picked inky blackberries from bramble thickets, hunted for mushrooms on fallen wood. Look, don't touch, as his daddy always said. He made soft heaps of russet-coloured leaves to jump in. In the winter, he listened to the wind roar through the treetops and waited for the song of a friendly robin. He swung from the mistletoe-covered branches, touched the sharp edges of holly leaves and built dens in the hollow of an old beech tree. One day, Archie was deep in the woods looking for just the right stick for his den when he came across an apple that had fallen on the light-dappled path. The apple was large and pale, and on its stalk was a single curly brown leaf. It was the colour of cowslips and speckled like a wren's egg. This apple didn't look like the ones growing on the tree in his garden. They were pinkish red. It didn't look anything like the apples at the supermarket, which were packed inside plastic bags, nor the apples he was given by Julie, the lunch lady at school, which were always crunchy and bright green. This apple wasn't like anything he'd seen before. Archie looked up, wondering where it had come from, and found a gnarled old tree with branches covered in fruit. All the apples were the colour of brimstone butterflies and flecked like starlings' wings. Archie put the apple in his coat pocket. When Archie got home, his daddy was getting supper ready. Archie put the apple in the middle of the kitchen table. "Goodness me, Archie's daddy said while scooping mashed potato onto their plates. "What have you got there?" Archie described how he'd found it in the wood. His daddy agreed that it wasn't like any apple he'd ever seen before. "It's the colour of early primroses," said Archie's daddy, "with mottled skin, like a toad." "Perhaps it's a magic apple," Archie said, "like the ones you get in fairy tales." At bedtime, Archie took the apple upstairs and put it on his windowsill, carefully resting it on a bed of moss. The next morning, Archie's daddy took the apple to the garden centre where he worked. He showed it to Jimmy and Veronica, but they were befuddled too. "It's not like any apple I've seen," said Jimmy. "Nor I," said Veronica. "But my cousin Bernadette could help. She's a scientist at the university and knows all about different trees and fruits." Archie's daddy arranged to visit Bernadette the following weekend. Until then, Archie stored the apple in the garden shed, wrapped in brown paper. "Well, blow me down with a feather," Bernadette said when Archie took the apple out of his backpack and unfolded the brown paper. "I'll have to do some tests, young Archie, but I believe you have something very special there. It's not like any apple I've seen before." Bernadette explained that most new types of apple grow in gardens, in orchards or along roads where people have thrown out an apple core from their car window and a tree has grown from seed. "But this," said Bernadette, picking up the apple, "there's something ancient about this one, I can tell. It's the colour of meadow buttercups, don't you think? And it has markings like a fallow deer." Bernadette asked if she could carry out some tests at the university to find out if the apple was related to any others. If it's a new kind of apple, Bernadette said, we'll have to give it a name. We could call it Archie's apple, said Archie. It didn't take long for the news to spread. The cottage by the wood was soon teeming with people. There were vans from TV stations parked outside and helicopters whirring overhead. Reporters with cameras and microphones were all shouting questions at Archie and his daddy. Archie, tell us about your apple. Is it true it's never been seen before? Then the telephone began to ring and ring and ring. When Archie's daddy finally answered, a man's voice boomed at him down the phone line. Hello, I'm Tarquin Macrankadell III, the CEO of Fruit Merchandising International. I've heard all about Archie's apple. It's a new variety, is that correct? Yes. Archie's daddy wasn't sure what else to say. Well, sir, I'd like to make you rich. Filthy rich, stinking rich, rotten, ranking, reeking rich, revoltingly, repellently, repulsively rich, appallingly, awfully, atrociously rich. I want to take Archie's apple global. Let's make this fruit bring home the loot. What do you say? Barely had Archie's daddy had a chance to reply to Tarquin Macrankadell III when there was a powerful knock at the door. Rat-a-tat-tat, rat-a-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat. Archie's daddy opened the door and there he was. Tarquin Macrankadell III, as shiny as a garden slug. He wore red braces and a pinstripe suit. He marched into the kitchen and took the apple from Archie. This apple is the colour of a light bulb, said Tarquin Macrankadell III, and the skin, it's rough like tarmac. When he talked, his waxy moustache moved about his top lip like a woodlouse. He lifted the apple into the air, as high as it would go. The apple wasn't the colour of a light bulb or rough like tarmac. It was the colour of maple leaves in autumn, with skin like the bark of silver birch. We'll make Archie's apple theme parks, bellowed Tarquin Macrankadell III. There'll be Archie's apple landmarks. We'll make Archie's apple cars, Archie's apple chocolate bars. We'll make Archie's apple hotels and hair gels. We'll do it all. We'll be the richest of them all. Archie and his daddy weren't sure what to make of Tarquin Macrankadell III, but before they knew it, Archie's apple was everywhere. Pictures of Archie's apple appeared on the side of buses and were plastered on high street billboards. Planes flew through the sky trailing Archie's apple banners. People everywhere wore Archie's apple T-shirts and Archie's apple trainers. There were apple recipe books and comic books and cartoons. An Archie's apple theme park was opened by Tarquin Macrankadell III with apple-shaped rides and roller coasters. There was even an Archie's apple film and TV show which turned Archie into the most famous boy in all the world. But none of it felt right to Archie and his daddy. Not right at all. One autumn evening, they walked to the far side of the wood. They walked and walked until they found the old apple tree and sat together between its twisted roots. Archie picked up a windfall apple from the ground and held it in his hands. It was the colour of a hornet moth and dappled like the skin of a newt. This apple isn't Archie's apple, is it? Said Archie. It's not mine at all. You're right, Arch, said his daddy, putting his arm around him. This tree doesn't belong to you or me or any of us. Its secrets and its treasures are all its own. When they got home, Archie's daddy telephoned Tarquin Macrankadell III to say they didn't want any more Archie's apple cars or chocolate bars, so could he please pull the plug on the wines and the airlines, shut the hotels and cancel the hair gels, and could he turn the theme park into a green park with meadows and woods and wilder places for everyone? Well, Tarquin Macrankadell III, CEO of Fruit Merchandising International, was so furious, so ferociously angry, so hopping mad, that steam came out of his shiny little ears. Maybe you heard him shouting, did you? It was very, very loud. Archie still goes to the far side of the wood. He sits there among the knotted roots of the apple tree, listening for the trill of the missel thrush, the tap-tapping of a woodpecker, or the distant screech of a barn owl. Beneath his feet, if he looks very carefully, he finds the tiny living things sheltering under the apple tree. A glossy stag beetle, a colony of ants busy among the mushrooms, or an earwig hiding under a papery leaf. Every day in the wood, Archie discovers something new.